thought we'd take a break from Isaiah today only because I just got back from a Polk Association meeting, and one of the pastors shared a great message today on faith. And I know all of you believe in faith, but he really brought out some interesting things about faith, and I think it was worth sharing. So I'm going to share a little bit about what he said about faith. In order for you to fully appreciate this, because he took a half an hour to share his message, and I'm going to try to do something in 5 minutes, you need to go back and read Hebrews chapter 13 about the hall of faith, and you also need to go and read Romans in chapter 4, verses 15 through 18, Hebrews 11, and then you'll have a little better idea about some of the scriptural references for faith. But let me tell you, first of all, the illustration that he gave. Suppose I were to write a letter on Golden Boss stationery, wrote it with perfect grammar and perfect spelling, and finished that letter, and then took another piece of scrap paper and wrote with imperfect spelling and imperfect grammar a notice about something. And I folded both documents up and put them in an envelope, addressed them carefully with correct zip codes and everything else that you needed to go in the way of information. But I didn't put a stamp on the letter that was written perfectly with no grammatic errors and no spelling errors. But I did put a stamp on the little piece of scrap paper. When I dropped both of those into a mailbox, what do you suppose would happen? Well, obviously, the one with a postage stamp on it would get to its recipient properly. And although it was not grammatically correct, and although the spelling might not have been correct, it would get to him and he would get the message. But the letter, no matter how carefully done and no matter how quality the paper was, or how grammatically correct or the spelling was perfect, would never get anywhere because the post office would return it back to me. Grace is a gift, but it's received by faith. Now, that's an interesting concept when you think about it. And Lois and I have had a recent experience with a cat that came out of the woods. It's obviously been in the woods quite some time because it's not at all accustomed to being around humans, and therefore any time we get anywhere near it, it takes off for the woods again. But nevertheless, this cat has come down to the front of our house a couple of times, and by grace, we put out a little dish of cat food and a little dish of water. That wouldn't make any difference to the cat if the cat didn't receive it. But the cat has. The cat has come down in the early evening or the middle of the night and eaten the cat food and drank some of the water, and seems to be appreciating it because it's now come back at least 5 times for the food and the water. And you say, well, how do you know it's not a raccoon or a bear or some other animal that's coming out of the woods and eating the food? Well, because I put out a game camera that is motion activated, and we're actually catching him in the process of coming in and eating the cat food and looking around and enjoying his water and his treat. He received the cat food by grace, but there was also a certain element of faith on his part. Faith that the food hadn't been poisoned, faith that we weren't going to shoot him when he came to take the food. And that's a pretty good picture of the grace and faith. But the speaker had more to say about faith. Let me just share you with you 4 very great truths that he said about faith. Faith reveals the character of God. And now, faith revealed the character of Lois and I to the cat, and the fact that we keep putting new cat food out there. But he would not realize our character and our grace if he didn't have the faith to keep coming back and checking the dish. The second thing that he said about faith was faith unchains the guidance of God. Faith unchains the guidance of God. That cat could go anywhere on 2,500 acres here on the top of the mountain, but his faith that that dish might have some more cat food in it released the guidance of God. In this case, we're not gods, but it released the guidance that he has to keep coming back. And believe me, unless something else hurts him and keeps him from coming back, my guess is that he's going to continue to come back as long as we put out food for him. And probably over time, we may actually be able to approach him and hopefully get him to a care center where he can get the proper shots and be adopted and have a home. He's a very pretty little cat. The third thing that he said was that faith eases the release of sin. Well, I can't use my cat for an illustration for this because I don't think cats are very much aware of sin. But nevertheless, I think when you think about faith, when you have faith that God is right and what he calls sin is sin, it makes it easier for us to release the sin. It makes it easier for us to give up whatever sin may have come into our lives. But it only comes by faith that God knows better than we do what's good for us. The fourth thing that he said about faith is it brings focus to the will of God. And I think that's very true. When we have faith and we see God's grace, we have a clearer focus on what God's will is for our lives. Now, I want to sum it all up by saying God didn't remember Abraham because of his failures. Let me say that again for you. God didn't remember Abraham because of his failures. God remembered Abraham because of his faith. Now, Abraham made a lot of failures, but God didn't rub his nose in those failures, but rather God remembered him and had him in the scriptures in the New Testament because of his faith, not his failures. That's encouraging to me. That shows you what great grace God has for us. He's not going to remember us because of our failures. He's going to remember us because of our faith. So let me wrap it all up with this. The greatest gift that we can give God is our faith. That's when we give him our faith, his grace is poured out on our lives. Let me say it again for you. The greatest gift we can give God is our faith. And when we give him our faith, he can pour his grace out on our lives. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you. And I pray that your faith would grow. I don't want it to be just the size of a mustard seed. I want it to be in total surrender to his will for my life. Because I know when my faith is a total surrender to his will for my life, that he'll pour out his grace and his blessings upon my life. God bless you and have a great day.